The frosting on the cake had barely set when Tessa said it. "You're only here out of pity, not because we care." She didn't whisper it. She said it like a joke, with a casual flick of her wine glass and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Evan chuckled, eyes on his phone. The kids, Sam and Lily, froze mid-bite, unsure if they were supposed to laugh too. I sat there still holding the serving knife, my hand wrapped around the old wooden handle. I'd used this knife every year since Tessa was 10. The blade had a nick in it from when she dropped it during her first attempt at baking. She cried that day. I kissed her forehead and told her accidents were just steps in becoming great. Now she wouldn't even look me in the eye. The silence that followed her words stretched across the table like spilled syrup, sticky, heavy, and impossible to clean up. "I'll get the plates," I said, not looking at anyone. No one objected. I stood, walked to the counter, and picked up the stack of ceramic dishes I'd set out earlier. My knees ached from the hours spent in the kitchen that morning. I'd made roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes, not that anyone said thank you. The kids wanted pizza. Evan had asked if we could keep it simple this year. I sliced the cake cleanly, placed each piece with care, and passed them around without comment. No one met my eyes. Tessa had moved on to telling Evan about a coworker's baby shower. Sam asked for extra whipped cream. I nodded, got up again, and brought the can from the fridge. They didn't sing. No candles were lit. I waited for someone to mention it, just one word. But there was nothing. When I sat back down, I saw the candle I'd set out earlier still sitting unused on the counter behind the toaster. I looked at it for a long moment, then I picked it up and slipped it quietly into my pocket. 2 years ago, I sold the only home I'd ever owned outright. It wasn't fancy, just a 2-bedroom with creaky stairs and windows that rattled when the wind picked up, but it was mine. I'd poured 30 years into that little place, painted the kitchen cabinets myself, one coat every night after work. The backyard roses had finally started blooming without much fuss. I would have stayed there forever, but Tessa called crying. Evan's business had folded. The bills were stacking up. The kids needed stability, she said. A bigger house and a better school district. She just needed a little help with the down payment. I transferred $80,000 that same week. No contract, no conditions. I told her, it's your turn to dream big. When they found this house, a 4-bedroom with a wraparound porch and a fig tree in the back, I moved in too. Temporarily, we agreed, just until things settled. I took the guest room downstairs. Tessa decorated it in beige and called it simple and calming, but it felt like a hotel room I wasn't meant to unpack in. I tried to make myself useful. Picked the kids up from school, ran errands, cooked most nights. I even paid for groceries, quietly sliding my card at checkout before Evan noticed. I didn't mind. I told myself I was helping them build the life they deserved. But as the weeks turned into months, I noticed how invisible I had become. Evan started inviting his colleagues over for dinner, real estate investors mostly. One night, as I was setting the table, Tessa pulled me aside. "Mom, would you mind eating early in the kitchen? It's just, they might not get our family dynamic." I nodded and smiled, even though the plate in my hand felt suddenly too heavy. After that, I learned to listen for footsteps, so I could quietly disappear when company came over. I stopped inviting my book club friends. No one visited. My corner of the house became smaller and quieter with each passing week. Even the family cat had learned which rooms not to enter. And now they'd made it clear even birthdays didn't belong to me. I raised Irma on my own after Harold passed. She was 5. He went to work one morning and never came home. A car ran a red light, and that was it. No warning, no goodbye. Just a folded flag and a funeral I paid for with my grocery money. After that, it was just the 2 of us. I worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on and food in the fridge, day shift at the library, nights shelving books at the university, and weekends cleaning offices downtown. I kept a little notebook in my coat pocket with every bill I owed and how many hours it would take to pay each one off. I made games out of counting change. I stitched Irma's Halloween costumes by hand. I cut my own hair with kitchen scissors. We didn't take vacations. We took walks and called it enough. When she got into college, I skipped a surgery I needed for a torn rotator cuff because her tuition was due. I told her the shoulder pain was from gardening. She never asked again. Even after she got married, I was still finding ways to help. I gave them $12,000 for the IVF treatment that finally brought Sam into the world. She sent me a thank you card that said, "Thanks for believing in us," and I kept it in my nightstand drawer until the ink faded. Years later, during my first round of chemo, I sat on the couch stitching a quilt for Lily. My hands were covered in small bandages, too shaky and raw to hold a needle properly, but I did it anyway. She had asked for one like the ones in old movies. Irma picked it up the next day. She didn't even notice the blood spots I'd scrubbed out of the corners. I never asked for thanks. I never expected it. But lately, I wonder if all the things I gave, quietly, willingly, somehow erased me in the process. Because the woman they see now, she isn't the one who held everything together. Because the woman they see now, she isn't the one who held everything together. And last night, I finally understood how far gone I really was. I went back into the kitchen after the dishwasher beeped. The dining room was already dark, chairs pushed back like a storm had passed through. I opened the trash bin to throw away a napkin, and there it was, my cake, face down in the garbage. A full half of it, barely touched. Chocolate smudged the inside of the plastic like it had been shoved in carelessly. No wrap, no cover. The same cake I had baked that morning, whisked by hand, frosted with butter, I softened between my palms because the mixer had shorted again. I had even pressed a single sugared violet on top. Lily said it looked like something from a fairy tale. Now it looked like something they couldn't get rid of fast enough. I closed the bin quietly and turned off the light. From upstairs, laughter spilled through the hallway vent. Evan's voice rang out, clear and unkind. "She acts like she's family or something." Tessa didn't correct him. She didn't say my name. She just answered flat. She should be grateful she's not in a nursing home. They laughed again, short and sharp, like they were in on a joke I'd never understand. I didn't cry. I walked to my room, peeled off the cardigan I'd worn every year since my 60th birthday, and folded it neatly over the foot of the bed. Then I untied my apron, smoothing the wrinkled corners with the palm of my hand before placing it gently into the bottom drawer of the nightstand. It still smelled like vanilla and burnt sugar. I knelt beside my suitcase, the old leather one with the brass lock, and turned the key I kept hidden behind a loose floorboard. Inside, under layers of pressed papers and manila envelopes, was the folder I never thought I'd need. The one marked House, Joint Ownership, Original Deed. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. I just sat there staring at the signature line and thought, they never once asked whose name was still on the title. And maybe that silence was about to end. I bought the house with them. That part they remember. What they chose to forget, or maybe never bothered to understand, was that my name didn't vanish when I moved into the guest room. When Evan's loan fell through and their down payment wasn't enough, I wired $80,000 from my savings. The title was drawn up with 3 names, not 2. I kept a copy of the deed in my suitcase under a bag of winter scarves. They never bothered to move. They never asked to see the paperwork again. I never offered. That suited all of us just fine until now. I opened the folder and laid everything out on the bed. Photocopies of every deposit I made to the joint account, monthly mortgage statements, my signature on every wire transfer, grocery lists marked with receipts, tuition payments I made directly to the school when their credit card bounced. I had folders by year, scans of text messages, canceled checks, not for leverage, at least not at the beginning. I kept records because I was raised to, because when you're a widow, a woman, and aging, people stop listening. But paper never forgets. I pulled my tablet from the drawer and tapped through the contacts. Elisa's name was still saved under E. Watson, legal. We met 30 years ago, back when her kids and Tessa played soccer on the same muddy field. She became a real estate attorney, then retired early after her husband passed. She was the only person I trusted with everything. I typed a message. "Hi, Elise, I need to talk," quietly. Within 5 minutes, she replied, "Anytime. Want to walk the trail? Like old times." I said yes. I didn't tell her what happened. Not yet. But the moment I hit send, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think in years. They believe I'm just some extra body in the house, someone they pity, someone they feed out of guilt. But they forgot the one thing that matters most. I own part of the floor they're standing on. Elise showed up the next afternoon with a container of soup and a tin of cornbread like she had a dozen times before. No one blinked. Tessa waved from the living room without looking up from her laptop. Evan didn't even glance over. We left through the side door and drove to the park 3 blocks away. It was quiet for a Saturday, just a few kids on bikes and one woman jogging laps with a golden retriever. Elise and I walked the trail like we used to when our girls were still young, and the biggest worry we had was packing enough sunscreen for field trips. I handed her a folder at the first bench. She didn't say anything at first, just flipped through the pages slowly. Title deed, mortgage records, the joint account statements, every receipt I had marked and saved. After a few minutes, she let out a breath and said, "You've been holding all the cards." I didn't think I'd need to play them. You can legally trigger a partition sale or force a buyout. They'd either have to pay you your share or the house goes on the market. I'm not looking to make them homeless, Elise. You wouldn't be. You'd be reminding them that you were never a guest. You were a co-owner. I stared out at the small pond ahead of us. A few ducks floated lazily near the reeds, completely unaware of the storm that had been brewing inside my walls. Elise turned toward me. "Are you ready to let go of your daughter?" I didn't answer right away. The question sat heavy between us. "I'm not letting go," I said finally. "I'm stepping back so she can finally stand alone." Elise nodded slowly. "When?" "Soon, but I want it done clean, quiet, no drama. I just want my part and I want out." We walked another lap in silence. Then I said, "I'll need help moving the funds, and I'll need you to prepare the letter." She squeezed my hand. And when we got back to the house, no one noticed I was gone. I moved carefully, like someone disassembling a house of cards with bare hands. No sudden gestures, no slammed doors, just quiet, deliberate unraveling. The first step was the joint account. I walked into the branch I'd used for 12 years and signed the closure forms without hesitation. The teller recognized me but didn't ask questions. I requested a cashier's check for my portion and had the balance moved into a private account under my own name. Next, I logged into the mortgage portal and canceled my half of the automatic draft. I had covered 50% of the payment since day one, sometimes more when they were short. They would notice the gap within a week, maybe less, once the next installment bounced. Then I called Elise. "It's time," I said. By the end of the day, she had drafted the first formal notice, a request for voluntary buyout. They'd have 30 days to respond. If they didn't, we'd move to a court-ordered partition and public sale. She offered to handle it. I declined. Let them read it the way they read everything else, from their inbox, with their guard down. I found a rental apartment one town over. It was smaller than what I was used to, but it had sunlight in the mornings and a garden patch out back with basil already sprouting. It came fully furnished. I signed the lease with a check paid in full for the year. No debt, no questions. I didn't pack much, just my clothes, my books, the photo albums they hadn't touched in years, and the sewing box I'd kept under the bed. Before I left, I sat at the kitchen counter one last time. I brewed a cup of coffee and looked around the room that had never really been mine. The air felt still, like the house itself was waiting to see what I would do. I opened my email, typed a message, and scheduled it for 7 a.m. the next morning. Subject, notice, message, your turn ends now. Then I closed the laptop, picked up my keys, and walked out the door. I left before the sun came up, careful not to let the door creak behind me. No note on the table, no farewell hug, just my steps on the gravel driveway and the click of my car door closing as the sky began to pale. By the time they woke up, I was already sipping coffee in my new kitchen, surrounded by quiet that didn't sting. The walls didn't echo with resentment here. The windows didn't judge. I unpacked my books, hung up one small framed photo of Tessa as a baby, and let the rest stay boxed. Back at the house, everything started to unravel. The thermostat clicked on, but the system didn't hum. It had been switched to manual. No auto settings, no preheated floors, just cold tiles and colder silence. Tessa tried to check the bank account. The password didn't work. Evan's card got declined at the gas station. When he called the bank, they told him the joint account had been closed by the co-owner. That phrase stopped him short. He must have repeated it to her because she tried to call me 11 times in a row. I watched the screen light up, then go dark. I didn't answer. On the second day, a courier delivered a thick envelope to their doorstep. Inside, a formal letter from Elise's office outlining the buyout terms. They could purchase my 40% share of the house for $144,000, my equity adjusted for appreciation, or agree to a partition sale. 30 days, no extensions? Tessa sent a text. "You're seriously doing this?" I didn't reply. The kitchen that used to buzz with sound now sat still. The fridge, once full from my weekend grocery runs, was half empty. The kids asked where Grandma went. Tessa told them I was taking a break. I suppose that wasn't entirely untrue. But what they didn't understand What maybe they still don't is that the house only stood as long as I stayed holding it up, and now that I'd let go, they were finally going to feel the weight. The glass table between us was spotless, too wide for comfort. Elise had set the room up with water, a bowl of peppermints, and folders lined perfectly along the center. It looked more like a business transaction than a conversation between mother and daughter. That suited me fine. Tessa sat stiffly across from me, her eyes red and puffy. Evan looked restless, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He hadn't said a word yet, but I could feel the blame rolling off him like heat from a car hood. Elise opened the meeting with formalities, tone measured and neutral. Then she slid the revised offer across the table. The buyout figure, now locked at $144,000, all legally sound, 30 days to pay, or we proceed with a public sale. Tessa picked up the paper with shaking hands. "I thought," she began, voice small. "I thought you were family." Evan scoffed. "You didn't think much when you let your mom pay your bills for 2 years?" She turned to glare at him. "You said it was fine. You said we'd pay her back eventually." I sat still, listening to them argue like strangers. It felt strange watching it from this side of the table. I leaned forward and spoke softly. "I gave," I said, "over and over, without keeping score. But you erased me from my own life, from my place in your home, from your children's routines, from your birthday lists. So now we reset." Tessa opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm not angry. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm offering you a path forward. Buy me out. 30 days. If not, we sell." Elise nodded, confirming the terms. No one yelled, no one stormed out. Evan muttered something under his breath as they left, and Tessa didn't meet my eyes when she walked past. But I didn't flinch. I watched them go, the weight lifting with each step. And when I got into Elise's car afterward, I exhaled like I hadn't in years. I had never spoken so little and said so much. The sun was just starting to lift above the rooftops when I stepped onto the porch with my coffee. The morning air held that early fall crispness, the kind that wakes your skin before your thoughts have time to catch up. I pulled the shawl tighter around my shoulders and listened to nothing. No footsteps overhead, no blender humming, no doors slamming too hard, just birds and breeze. A week ago, the check had arrived. The envelope was plain, addressed in Evan's handwriting. No note inside, no apology, no attempt at explanation, just the number. $144,000, signed and cleared. That was fine. I deposited it the next morning, walked down to the florist, and picked out a bouquet of deep orange tulips. I hadn't bought flowers for myself in over a decade. I arranged them in a mason jar on the kitchen table, right next to a stack of library books waiting to be returned. I joined the local book club. Women my age, some retired, some not. No one asked where I used to live. No one cared who my daughter was. This morning, I lit a candle. Just one. No cake, no singing, no cameras, just flame and silence. It stood tall on a small ceramic plate I'd kept from my old house, the one they said didn't match their decor. Today is my birthday, not the kind you host for others or wait for someone else to remember. It's the kind where you look yourself in the mirror, trace every line on your face and say, "I made it. I survived every quiet dismissal, every eye roll, every forgotten thank you. I never needed pity. I needed space. I was never a burden. I was the foundation." And today, I sit in the house I chose, on a chair I paid for, sipping coffee from a mug no one rolled their eyes at. It's not just my birthday. It's the day I gave myself back my